Resuming debate, the honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the importance of culture and diversity in our country and to highlight some of the investments that our government is making to ensure that we protect, preserve, and promote our country's cultural institutions and our multicultural society. Our culture, our ideas, songs, and stories give meaning to who we are as Canadians. Our culture and cultural products are the instruments that help us communicate with others and share differing views, entertaining and informing us, all while weaving together a shared sense of identity. Culture is at the heart of every community across our country and around the world, and Canada is a testament to the ability to include and respect all cultures in one society. Perhaps we're uniquely poised to be welcoming and accepting due to the way our country was founded, distinct societies coming together to found one country. Peoples from other parts of the world quickly joined, adding their culture and traditions to the fabric of our country, weaving the ever-changing tapestry that is Canada. Our government has a solemn duty to act as a steward of Canada's cultural institutions and an obligation to promote and foster the institutions, activities, and people which help our culture flourish, grow, and adapt to changing times and circumstances. Our cultural mediums help us to exchange ideas and experiences, and the conversations they invoke are the greatest celebrations of the diversity that is at the heart of Canadian culture. Our cultural industries help us exchange diverse ideas and experiences, but they also make a significant contribution to our economy. Over the years, the number of companies and individuals involved in producing cultural products has grown dramatically. One of the companies that has always been at the heart of Canadian content is the CBC. There are some on the opposition benches that would like to see the CBC eliminated. Strikingly, there are some of the same members who seem most out of touch with what true Canadian values are. The CBC not only ensures that all Canadians have access to Canadian content, but that every Canadian can access local content. The reality is that in a country as vast as Canada, there are going to be areas where it does not make financial sense for profit-driven entities to produce local content there. Mr. Speaker, every Canadian deserves to know what is going on in their area of the country and to partake in the shared experience of cultural exchange which builds community. To that end, I am proud to say that our government has invested $675 million in the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, Radio-Canada, to disseminate and support world-class Canadian content and to provide Canadians with better access to programs and services in the digital era. Since I know that this question is going to be coming from my Conservative colleagues, I will address it now. Yes, I'm aware that CBC/Radio-Canada has asked for an additional $400 million from the government. The opposition has made great fanfare of this request, decrying it as just a cash grab. What they fail to mention, however, is that this request comes because CBC Radio-Canada wants to eliminate all ads. Mr. Speaker, through you, I would like to ask those watching to think about what this means for our national broadcaster. Much like the BBC, our national broadcaster can be a strong, stable, well-funded public broadcaster with the primary goals of serving the interests of domestic audiences and diverse communities and helping to promote Canadian content. Agree or disagree, this is an idea worth seriously considering, and I'm happy that the government is doing just that. Bien que nos industries culturelles soient...
Although our cultural industries are a fundamental aspect of the Canadian economy, our government also recognizes that culture and cultural products are not only products that can be bought and sold. Our stories, our songs, our symbols, and our sacred spaces may sometimes generate a profit, but they are also precious because of their meaning and the feeling of belonging and understanding that they invoke. This understanding of the intrinsic value of our cultural spaces is very important to me. This is why I'm so proud that our government has chosen to invest in the places and institutions that are the guardians of our cultural institutions, including our national museums, our monuments, and our parks. Canada's national museums are important cultural institutions that play an essential role in the preservation of Canadian heritage and the education of Canadians. I'm happy to say that in the 2016 budget, our government is proposing up to $105 million over 5 years for our national museums, and $280 million more over 5 years to meet the infrastructure needs of 3 cultural institutions that are significant to Canada, including the Museum of Science and Technology of Canada, the National Arts Centre, and the Museum of Fine Arts of Canada. Furthermore, we have committed to providing funding of over $168 million over 2 years for some of Canada's cultural spaces. This is as part of our funding for social infrastructure. Thanks to initiatives like this one, the 2016 budget ensures that community spaces that protect, preserve, and promote our culture while entertaining and informing us will be there for us and our children in the future. This is an essential process not only to ensure the protection of cultural artifacts from our past, but also to ensure that artists and innovators of tomorrow will have the spaces they need to create so that they can find inspiration.
Our country's storytellers. Regardless of the medium they use, our artists capture moments and ideas and weave them into the fabric of our individual and collective identities. The weaving of this fabric of identity is especially important in a quickly changing and globalized world, as we work within the context of our ever-changing and diverse society to create a sense of what it means to be Canadian. Fostering the development of the arts here at home is an important part of ensuring that those who have stories to tell are given the opportunity to weave their own contribution into this national fabric. Encouraging this freedom of expression is fundamental to our understanding of ourselves and to ensuring that all voices have the opportunity to be heard in our democracy. But if artists to flourish, artists need to ensure that they can work in an environment in which their voices can be heard regardless of how popular the sentiment they express is, and regardless of the viewpoint or background they come from. Ensuring equal access to the artistic world is why it is so fundamental that our government works to foster the development of the arts in Canada through grants, services, and awards to professional Canadian artists and arts organizations, as well as through scholarly awards. In Budget 2016, our government has committed to ensuring that avenues to expression are open to all Canadians through its investment of $550 million in the Canada Council for the Arts. Furthermore, our government has made commitments to the industries which support these artists, including a $22 million commitment to Telefilm Canada, a $13.5 million commitment to the National Film Board of Canada, as they work to ensure the cultural, commercial, and industrial success of Canada's audiovisual industry. This funding will work in tandem with our commitment to work with other countries to realize new and creative artistic projects, a commitment demonstrated when the Minister of Heritage signed the Audiovisual Co-Production Treaty with the Republic of Ireland earlier this year. Working through partnerships like this allow us to tell new stories and achieve new levels of creativity as we support each other in telling our country's stories. In 2004, British Cultural Secretary Tessa Jowell commissioned a paper on the arts, which argued that the primary purpose of the arts is, in quotes, to communicate perceptions about the human condition that can't be communicated in any other way, end quote. The arts are unique. They're able to help people interact with the world around them by helping them understand, work, and play in the world around them, to enrich their experience by bringing feeling, beauty, and passion to their lives, and to provide a safe place where they can work to build their confidence, self-worth, and self-esteem. Other efforts can only do some of these things. The arts do all three, and that is why we must continue to support them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I want to thank my neighbour from Kitchener Centre for his comment and for his work and his writing. Mr. Speaker, I don't think anyone in this House is denigrating the arts, but Mr. Speaker, we all know that whatever project we want to support, there has to be money to be able to support that. And when you're borrowing money on more money and more money to build up a deficit of $30 billion, which is going to add $10 billion per year to interest costs alone over the next 4 years. This is a concern, Mr. Speaker. So I wonder if my colleague could comment on the costs of his proposals. And secondly, Mr. Speaker, there's a question that I asked the Finance Minister this morning, which we did not receive an answer for, and it's found in the order paper today, Mr. Speaker, and it's referring to Bill C-29. And motion number 1, which was proposed by the member for Winnipeg North, actually proposes that one of the clauses of Bill C-29 be deleted. I'm wondering if my colleague could explain why a member of the government would actually move to delete a clause of a government bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my honourable friend for the work that he does in his writing also. He's been a great mentor and advisor ever since I became elected, so I wanted to thank him personally. One of the things that I didn't get to in my remarks, Mr. Speaker, is the importance of the arts and culture community, not only in my writing, which has a very strong arts and cultural community, but also the importance of the arts and cultural community in Canada. Mr. Speaker, we know that from the Conference Board of Canada and the latest analysis, that the arts and cultural community in Canada provides $84.6 billion worth of economic benefits to Canada. That represents, Mr. Speaker, 1.1 million jobs. Mr. Speaker, arts and culture are a very important part of the Canadian fabric, not only as an economic multiplier, but also as a social multiplier that keeps us all together. And just for a final statistic, Mr. Speaker, that the arts and culture community also had 7.4% to our collective GDP. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. L'honorable.
The honourable member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata-les-Basques. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I listened to my colleague's speech. I know that his speech had to do mainly with culture. But since we're talking about Bill C-29, I thought it would be important to talk about another aspect, which seems to me more critical and more relevant to the government's plan, which is, and it has to do with infrastructure. Now, there's been talk about the infrastructure bank and also other initiatives that the government is taking. For example, when it comes to the possible privatization of bridges and airports. There was talk with Credit Suisse and also with Morgan Stanley in this regard. So I'd like to get my colleagues' comments on this question of the potential privatization of our ports and airports, because I think he would agree with me that these are key pieces of infrastructure when it comes to the economy. So I'd like to know what he thinks about his government's idea of potentially moving toward the privatization of ports and airports.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the honourable member for his very insightful question. The only thing I can say, Mr. Speaker, is if you look at the economic indicators that are right now that are happening around the world, we know that in parts of the world the long-term bond rate is very low. We know that inflation is at 1%. We know the lower bound is close to 0%. Mr. Speaker, this is the right time, historically, in our country's history, where we need to look at what infrastructure projects that are out there, what are important not only for our communities, but what are also important for our nation-building exercises. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the honourable member will agree with me after highlighting those statistics, that this is the best time right now in our history to make sure that we make those important infrastructure investments for the benefit of all Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.